A former ballet dancer working as a grocery store cashier was impaled by a golf club at work on Friday. Police say first responders found 66-year-old Robert Scafty with a broken golf club in his torso after a 6-hour standoff at a nearby apartment. Police arrested a suspect, 44-year-old Taylor Schultz. Scafty trained at the Westside School of Ballet in Santa Monica and performed with ballet companies in Kansas and Minneapolis. So far, no word on what could have prompted the assault. A man is accused of murdering his girlfriend days after being released from jail for beating her, then trying to drink bleach in a suicide attempt. A grand jury in Hennepin County has indicted Matthew Brenneman on first-degree and second-degree murder charges in the death of his girlfriend, Danica Bergeson, last July. Days earlier, Brenneman had beaten Bergeson. He was charged with harming her and released. That didn't stop Brenneman. On July 8th, police were called to an apartment for complaints of banging. They said they found Brenneman inside where he had attempted to drink bleach. Bergeson's body was wrapped in blankets in a garbage bag. Her body was covered with bruises and abrasions, and investigators believe she'd been dead for at least 1 day. Police say they found incriminating letters around Bergeson's body that Brenneman wrote, saying he never loved a woman the way he did Bergeson. In one he said, "Things happened abruptly. I didn't know what to do." Crime scene photos show a 13-year-old boy after police say he murdered his mother. And before that, he's standing over her as he's getting ready to stab her to death. Derek Rosa snapped a selfie after the crime, his hands smeared with blood. Law and Crime obtained these photos through a records request, and they are disturbing. On October 12th, a home security camera recorded Derek's mom, Irina Garcia, in bed with her 14-day-old daughter. The baby was Derek's half-sister. You can actually see screen grabs of Derek standing over his mother, who is in bed holding the little baby girl. Photos also show the knife that prosecutors say Derek used to kill his mother. The tip of the knife is actually broken. After Derek killed his mom, police say he actually called 911 and confessed, reporting that he had killed his mom. He also took that selfie and texted a friend, "Goodbye." Derek was an honor roll student, which has people wondering what went wrong here.
In Los Angeles, police say one man murdered 4 people over 4 days, including a father of 2 young children. 33-year-old Jared Joseph Powell is accused of following a man home in this car last week and shooting him in his garage, and then murdering 3 homeless people over the following days. The first victim, Nicholas Cymbalin, lived in a suburb of LA and worked for the county. Police say Powell was captured by surveillance cameras.
And the result of their work has positively identified the handgun recovered from Mr. Powell's car as being the murder weapon of our 3 homicides. Additionally, our investigation has documented Mr. Powell's vehicle as being at the murder scene of all 3 homicides.
Police say license plate readers helped track down Powell. He's in the Los Angeles County Jail, charged with 4 counts of murder. A mom in Texas is accused of shaking her 2-month-old baby and then slamming her on a table. And instead of calling for help, police say she searched the web for shaken baby syndrome for hours before calling 911. The allegation is absolutely unbelievable. Police in Abilene, Texas, took Clarissa Nicole Stewart into custody. The little baby died on November 15th. A Texas TV station reports text messages between Stewart and her husband showed signs that she may have been suffering from postpartum depression. One read, "I want nothing to do with when you're off. I can't stand her anymore. The second she cries, it throws me into a rage I didn't know I could have." Another stated, "It's getting harder and harder to love her." Police say Stewart confessed to slamming her baby on a table and then waiting 6 hours to call for help. Stewart used to work with children. Right now, Stewart is being held on bail in jail. In Arizona, authorities say it was an on-duty tribal police officer that hit a woman and then took off. 45-year-old Josh Anderson is accused of not only killing 30-year-old Iris Billy, but then going and notifying her next of kin, pretending he wasn't the one responsible for it. Anderson had been employed by the White Mountain Apache Police for 20 years and was said to be well known among the residents of the Fort Apache Reservation. Early Thanksgiving morning, police got a call that a woman had been hit by a car and they found Billy dead. Anderson himself responded to the scene, but when police noticed significant damage to Anderson's patrol car, they got suspicious. He was arrested the next day. The investigation has now been turned over to the FBI. We have some interesting news in the Long Island serial killer case. A news outlet on Long Island is reporting that DNA found on the victims' bodies actually matches the DNA taken from the wife of Rex Heuermann, the man charged in the murders. Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't we already know that? We kind of did, since court documents said mitochondrial DNA found on hairs on the victims came back to Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup. But Newsday has confirmed, quoting a source, that DNA was actually taken from Asa Ellerup when Heuermann was arrested last summer. We didn't know that until now. It's not clear at this time whether Ellerup gave the sample voluntarily or whether law enforcement used a warrant to get her DNA.
49 years after a suspected victim of the scorecard killer was found in California, genetic genealogy has identified him. Othram Labs says the body found on a road in Orange County in September 1974 was Michael Ray Schlick. Schlick was from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Othram says they found relatives of Schlick's who said they hadn't seen him since April of that year. Their DNA helped identify him. Othram says Schlicht is believed to be a victim of serial killer Randy Kraft. He was arrested in 1983 with the body of a dead man in the passenger seat of his car and a bottle of sedatives. Kraft is on death row at San Quentin for the death of 16 people. There are 10 more he's suspected of killing.
We're all extremely nervous, you know, and also I already cut the phone line, and it's funny because I left the cutter there. I can't come back and go Schneider, and the door opened, so here I am, you know. So do I just walk out the back door and they call the police, or I go for it? I went for it.
Chilling details of his first killings and of his victims' final words.
Mrs. Lotero had woke up, and she actually said, God have mercy on her soul.
Police are searching for a 6-foot-tall man with dark curly hair and badly stained teeth, dubbed the Night Stalker, who may have committed 13 murders and 12 grisly assaults in the San Gabriel and San Fernando Valley since February. The crimes are different, but the method is always the same. He enters private homes at night through an unlocked door or open window and hunts down his prey while they sleep.
Aside from the nature of entry, the approximate time of day that entry is made, beyond that, it's difficult to categorize them.
Victims range between the ages of 16 and 80, from women alone to couples with children. Some have been strangled, some shot. Most of the women have been raped. What baffles police is that the attacks are random. The investigative task force is hampered by a psychological profile that differs from most serial killers.
He doesn't make any substantial efforts to choose a victim and then do whatever it takes to enter. He seems to enter whenever entry is easy.
It didn't take cops in Pennsylvania long to figure out who killed an elderly woman in her kitchen. Police found 85-year-old Margaret Seltman dead, and it appeared she'd been severely beaten. Her husband, 84-year-old Barton Seltman, said he didn't know what happened, but he was covered in blood. He eventually told paramedics that he hurt his wife during a fight over money for their cat's vet bills. Can you believe that? Martin told police his wife grabbed a knife, so he hit her with a chair. Police believe he then used a glass candle jar to beat her to death. He's being held without bond on murder charges.
The dismembered body of a man police believe to be in his 20s was found in garbage bags behind an apartment on the north side of Chicago, just a few doors away from where Larry Eyler lives. Neighbors in the area say they saw Eyler recently carrying bags to the dumpster. Chicago police are still in the process of searching the area for evidence, and they are questioning Eyler in connection with this murder. The 30-year-old man was taken into custody this morning after a janitor discovered the cut-up body in the trash.
The body was just, the arm was off, the neck was off, the leg was off, and he's got a stab wound, I don't know, about 7-8 stab wound.
Eyler has been a suspect in as many as 19 other homosexual slayings and has been out of jail on a $10,000 bond on a murder charge.
We are all here because of me today, of what I did. My actions were because of what I chose to do. I could not stop myself, but I am the one who led to why we are here today. I am a really bad person. I have done terrible things that no one should ever do. I have lied, been not trustworthy. I've hurt many people, and that's what I've done. That's it. Thank you, Your Honor.
In the 1970s, Ted Bundy is believed to have murdered dozens of women and girls all across the country. He decapitated at least 12 of his victims, escaped twice from jail, and killed even more women while on the run. In fact, his own attorney reportedly called him, quote, the definition of heartless evil. Bundy was sentenced to death and died in a Florida electric chair in 1989. But before he was executed, he confessed to killing some 30 people, including 2 right here in Idaho.
Absolutely horrified that I was capable of doing something like that, to have been possessed by something so awful and so alien.
Well, what parts would you take, Paul? The head and the sexual part?
Yeah,
what would you do with the sexual part?
That was in.
One was painted, they said.
Oh, that one, when they died, I just put the paint over it. Is there anything like,
When you dig these graves up, you were kind of in a haze too, is that it?
That's what I could do, just
Then what would you do with the head?
That must have been taken from reading about these magazines and everything, taking the flesh off like a headhunter.
What would you do with the sexual parts?
I wouldn't enjoy it or see.
How long ago did you start?
Like I say, might be 4 years.
What would you do with the sexual parts?
Them in the box, that was in.
I wish I never got that gun. I wish to God I never would have had my murder. I just wish I never would have done what I did. I still have to say to myself, I still say that was a self-defense, because most of them either were going to start to beat me up or were going to screw me down. Not anyone who doesn't ask you. And they get rough with me. So I fight them and I get away from them. And then as I get away from them, I run to the front of the car or jump over the seat or whatever, grab my gun and just start shooting. Which they would be out of the car, most of them would be nude. Because they just close up. And then they didn't think about running back in a car or anything. I would start shooting out from out of the car.
I asked her to have sex with me, and she told me not right now. She went to jump out of the car, which I grabbed her and pulled her back in the car. We drove for a little piece farther than that, and I pulled off because she was fighting so hard I almost lost control of the car and wrecked. Well, after I pulled over, I grabbed her by the neck and choked her until she died. And I had sex with her again.
They got me a job with Powell Mortuary, being the night man picking up bodies at the hospitals and stuff for them. I worked as a night man only. I did have nothing to do with the bodies. All this talk that I slept with the dead ones or had sex with dead bodies, there is no truth to any of that.
You didn't live in the mortuary?
I lived in the mortuary, yes, but not in the embalming room. I mean, they make it sound like, I slept in the crypts with them. And I never climbed into a coffin or anything like that. That is so damn ridiculous. And besides, the dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.
Sure, I get angry. I get very, very angry and indignant. I don't like being locked up for something I didn't do, and I don't like my liberty taken away, and I don't like being treated like an animal, and I don't like people walking around and ogling me like I'm some sort of weirdo, because I'm not. There's going to be people turning up in canyons, and there's going to be people being shot in Salt Lake City because the police there aren't willing to accept what I think they know, and they know that I didn't do these things. I'm not guilty.
John Did you kill those two women?
John Bitroff, a carpenter from Manorville, was only caught for 2 cold case murders of sex workers. The victims were 31-year-old Rita Tangretti, discovered beaten and strangled in late 1993, and Colleen McNamee, who was 20. She was found in January 1994 in the Manorville Patchogue area. The torso of one victim tied to the serial killer, Jessica Taylor, was discovered in Manorville, where Bitroff lived, in 2003, while her hands and skull were found during the Gilgo Beach investigation in 2011. We noted that the torso of another unknown woman had also been found in Manorville in 2000, which matched up with the head, hands, and legs of a Gilgo Beach victim in 2011. There are remains of the victims at Gilgo that may be attributed to the handiwork of Mr. Bitroff, and that investigation is continuing.
A man who's confessed to killing women nationwide, Samuel Little, was indicted for 2 cold case murders in Cuyahoga County. Detectives nationwide have been interviewing the 78-year-old, checking DNA and reopening unsolved murders, looking for connections. The Lake County unsolved murder happening in Willoughby Hills in 1983. A woman was found dead along I-271. Willoughby Hills police interviewed Little in Texas, and they say he has confessed to the crime. But Little has not yet been indicted because the victim has still never been identified. Willoughby Hills police are hoping someone can add the final piece of this puzzle by helping put a name to their victim. Little has confessed to murdering 93 women across the United States.
Paul Bernardo's name brings similar reactions from most Canadians. The infamous Scarborough serial killer has been incarcerated in Kingston since 1995, when his indeterminate sentence began for the brutal murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. Now, according to multiple sources, Bernardo has left his cell in Millhaven Maximum Security Penitentiary for a medium security facility in Quebec. La Macasa is a short drive from Mont Tremblant in the Laurentian Mountains. The convicted murderer, rapist, and kidnapper was moved discreetly. Bernardo was arrested and convicted in 1995 of kidnapping, torturing, and killing 15-year-old Kristen French and 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey in the early 1990s near St. Catharines, Ontario. He and his now ex-wife Carla Homolka were also convicted of manslaughter after drugging and sexually assaulting Homolka's younger sister, Tammy, in 1991. Danson says both he and the families were very disappointed to hear of the transfer to a medium security prison.
Police searched Gein's house. They had a feeling they were not going to like what they found. Hanging from the ceiling was the headless corpse of a woman, gutted like a deer. They soon found the remains of Mary Hogan, along with at least 9 shrunken heads and other body parts, which Gein had scattered throughout the house. He told police that he'd been digging up the graves of women who were long dead and eating parts of their bodies. Gein was found unfit to stand trial and was committed to a state mental institution in January 1958. But 10 years later, he was considered sane enough to appear before a court. After a week, it became clear he was anything but. Psychiatrists thought that Gein's obsession with his dead mother drove him to murder and dig up corpses. He was looking for a substitute for the only woman he'd ever loved.
In Kentucky, new details are coming to light about the death of a 4-year-old girl. Chloe Darnell was last seen alive in September. Her cousin, 24-year-old Brittany Slaughter, had custody of her. Now Slaughter and her boyfriend, Adam Hayes, are charged with murdering Chloe and abusing her corpse. During a preliminary hearing yesterday, a judge heard testimony that Slaughter and Hayes had a history of abusing Chloe. Hayes and Slaughter initially told a deputy investigating Chloe's disappearance that she had hit her head and they were too high to call 911 for help. But at the hearing, it came out that Hayes would actually discipline Chloe very severely for doing things a normal 4-year-old does, like wetting her pants. Chloe's cause of death hasn't been determined yet, but a preliminary autopsy revealed she had fractures to her skull and ribs. Experts are still trying to determine when those injuries occurred. A man who was just released from prison after serving more than 30 years for murdering 2 pregnant women is actually back in jail, accused of murdering his wife. Joseph Wingard was released from prison in Illinois in January. He'd been serving time for the murders of those 2 pregnant women in the 1990s. Then in June, someone found Wingard's wife, Lone Williams, shot in the abdomen at her home. She died at the hospital. Police say Wingard had been on the run until last Saturday night when he turned himself in. Wingard faces a first-degree murder charge. 2 men are under arrest after police say they found a young woman's body in an orchard not far from where her car was found on fire. All of this happened in Madera County, California. One of the men, 23-year-old Vicente Jasso, is the ex-boyfriend of the victim, Melanie Rios Camacho. Police say Jasso dated the victim for a few months, but the two broke up a few days before Thanksgiving. Police identified Jasso and his friend Jose Lopez Hernandez as the suspects in Camacho's murder. They were able to bring in the friend for questioning, but when they tried to stop Jasso's car, he led them on a high-speed chase, throwing some of the victim's belongings out the window as he went. He was eventually captured and charged with murder, while Lopez Hernandez was charged as an accessory. A female wrestler whose popularity spiked in the 1990s and early 2000s is going to spend the next 17 years in prison for driving drunk and killing a man. Tamara Sitch is better known by her wrestling name, Sunny. In March of 2022, she was in Volusia County, Florida, when her Mercedes crashed into a Kia at a stoplight. The elderly man driving that Kia, 75-year-old Julian Lassiter, hit another vehicle in front of him, and he died at the scene. Sitch was treated at a hospital and released. Officials say her BAC was .28. That's more than 3 times the legal limit. In August of this year, she pleaded no contest to DUI resulting in damage to a person and was sentenced to 17 and a half years in prison. And this is not Sitch's first DUI. In fact, she'd been arrested for at least 6 previous DUIs in multiple states.
Car! Yeah, where you at? I'll stab you, little that's it. Hey! Stab you! God! Yeah! Alright, I got a
DNA technology was used to identify this teenager. Her name's Susan Poole. She was from Broward County. Nearly 50 years ago, this 15-year-old, her remains were found tied to a tree just north of Singer Island, right there along alternate A1A. She was the victim of a convicted serial killer. Gerard Schaefer was his name, a former police officer and Martin County Sheriff's deputy, actually. He lived in Fort Lauderdale. It was the same area where Susan was from. In 1996, Schaefer was killed in prison by a fellow inmate. He got arrested for kidnapping 2 other girls, taking them out on A1A and tying them up in the mangroves. He was convicted for killing several girls, in fact, that were also tied to trees or to the mangroves. So with Susan's remains now identified in this cold case, detectives are now searching for her friends, trying to help them piece together her final days.
Sheriff's deputies say they found the body of Valerie Tyndall buried in a homemade box in the yard of a neighbor her family trusted. Tyndall hadn't been seen alive since June 7th. Now the Rush County Sheriff says Patrick Scott, who was not only Valerie's neighbor, but also her boss, has admitted to strangling her with a belt on the last day she was seen alive and then burying her in his yard. Court documents claim Scott said his wife and daughter don't know nothing about his killing of Valerie. He's quoted as telling detectives he strangled her with a belt that he continued to wear after he used it to kill her. Valerie worked for Scott's landscaping business in the summer months mowing lawns. Detectives and federal agents say they found boxes made of 2x4s in the yard. One agent saw orange fingernails on a body that looked like the fingernails in a photo that Valerie posted on social media back on June 7th. The other box contained VHS tapes and other records. Remember Susan Smith, the South Carolina mom who told anyone who would listen that a black man carjacked her and kidnapped her kids back in the 1990s? When in reality, she drove those little boys into a pond and watched them drown?
I would like to say to whoever has my children, that they please bring them home to us where they belong.
Susan Smith is going to be up for parole soon, and she's apparently told men who are interested in her that she thinks that she would make a good stepmom. This is coming from transcripts of prison phone calls obtained by The Messenger. Smith is quoted as telling one man, "I could be a good stepmom. I could see myself around kids." The man responded, "You'd be great, babe." She's up for parole in November of 2024. A New York police chief says it's the worst case he's ever seen in his 20 years in law enforcement. A woman and her boyfriend are under arrest for brutally killing the woman's 3-year-old son. Caitlin Cyrus and Giovanni Vega are charged with assault, manslaughter, and reckless endangerment. Messina police responded to a 911 call at the home not far from the Canadian border. They found 3-year-old Caden with severe injuries. He had to be airlifted to a hospital in Vermont. Police say 2 days before the 911 call, Vega picked up the little boy and threw him against a wall, then repeatedly slammed his body into the floor. Authorities say his own mom did nothing to stop it. Caden had a broken arm, a broken leg, lacerated liver, and severe swelling and bleeding in his brain, which led to a complete loss of brain function. He died. Both Vega and Cyrus have pleaded not guilty and are being held without bond. More charges are expected.
Police today continue to search for any clues in the near-fatal shooting of 29-year-old William Carnes and the rape of his girlfriend. They're apparently the latest victims of the Night Stalker, thought to be responsible now for 34 brutal attacks, 14 of them fatal. These serial killings, once confined to the near Los Angeles area, are now spread over 500 miles from San Francisco to Orange County. Just as before, the assailant entered a house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood in the pre-dawn hours on Sunday through an unlocked window and attacked the couple while they slept. Neighbors are terrified. The killer, who attacks randomly, is described as white, 25 to 30 years old, with a predominant feature of badly stained teeth. So 5,000 flyers have been distributed to Los Angeles dentists asking for help with identification. A total of $35,000 in rewards has been offered, including today a $16 donation from this group of concerned school children. Today, the search for California's Night Stalker continues, and many residents sleep with their doors and windows bolted tight, despite 100-degree temperatures.
Alicia Adams had faced a second-degree murder charge in the death of little Athena Brownfield. A postal worker found Athena's older sister wandering near Adams's home earlier this year and reported Athena missing to police in Cato County, just outside of Oklahoma City. An alert was issued for Athena and searches launched. Investigators said in January that Alicia Adams claimed her husband, Ivan Adams, beat Athena to death. He was charged with first-degree murder. Now prosecutors say that story was a complete lie. They claim an autopsy revealed Athena died from pneumonia and malnutrition. So Ivan Adams's murder charge has now been downgraded to second-degree murder from first. Alicia Adams had been charged with child neglect. Now she's charged with first-degree murder. But that charge could be changed to second-degree murder as investigators find new evidence. Athena's mother faces child neglect charges for leaving her children with the Adamses. A beloved tech worker in San Francisco is dead, and her boyfriend is accused of murdering her. Police went to Kimberly Wong's home on November 30th and found her stabbed to death. Earlier this week, the San Francisco DA charged her boyfriend, Scott Fisher, with her murder. Fisher faces 26 years to life in prison. A woman in Georgia trying to make a so-called Good Samaritan arrest is found guilty of murdering a man she chased down.
With regard to count 1 as to the offense of malice murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count 2 as to the offense of felony murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
The jury in Hannah Payne's trial deliberated for just 2 hours before finding her guilty of malice murder and other charges in the death of Kenneth Herring back in 2019. Payne couldn't hold back tears as those verdicts were read. The jury found she defied a 911 call taker who told her not to follow Herring in her car after he hit another vehicle and kept driving. Payne followed Herring, who witnesses said at the time seemed disoriented. Payne was armed with a gun and claimed she struggled with Herring, who then pulled the trigger and shot himself. This all happened in Clayton County, Georgia. Payne could get life in prison with or without parole when she's sentenced. The father of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer has died. Lionel Dahmer famously stood by his son, who murdered 17 young men and boys in the Milwaukee area from 1978 to 1991. Lionel visited his son every month in prison, saying the crimes did not match the gentle young man he knew his son to be. Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death in prison in 1994. Lionel Dahmer recorded some of his conversations with his son. Those conversations were recently featured in a Fox Nation show.
All the times I should have been caught, I never was. Absolutely nothing is too great not to be forgiven.
Lionel Dahmer was a chemist, and what's really interesting is the fact that he tried to get his son help back in 1989 when he was sentenced to 5 years probation for molesting a child. At that time, he said that something had to be done. Lionel Dahmer was 87 years old. The woman in Alabama has admitted to beating her 4-year-old nephew to death with a broomstick after first blaming it on the boy's older sister. Yolanda Cole has pleaded guilty to a charge of manslaughter in the death of little King Lyons in February of last year. At that time, King's 9-year-old sister had also been charged, but Cole's guilty plea lets the little girl off the hook, according to the prosecutor's office in Mobile, because she had nothing to do with the crime. The details of King's life and death are absolutely horrifying. Witnesses had testified at a hearing that Cole withheld water from King because he had accidents, and she once found him drinking from a toilet and laughed and said, "That's what he gets." Yes, seriously, that is what she said. King had been whipped with a belt and electrical cords, according to a 6-year-old relative who witnessed it. Cole will be sentenced next February. A man in Ohio is charged with murdering his father after calling 911 and saying he found him dead. Listen to Zane Pelfrey calmly talk with the 911 call taker.
911, where is your emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not 100% this is an emergency situation. I just got home and we found my father dead.
Prosecutors in Claremont County, east of Cincinnati, say Pelfrey's father, Dwayne Pelfrey, was dead because he murdered him. Interviews with witnesses and family members led to Zane's arrest. Here's more of that 911 call.
And please tell me, why does it look like he's dead?
Tongue swollen, blue and purple, and showing up all over himself and not breathing.
Okay, so he's not breathing. Is he cold?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think he's beyond any help?
Yes.
Zane Pelfrey faces several charges, including tampering with evidence, theft, and aggravated murder. And deputies say that Pelfrey was actually pretty forthcoming with them about what happened. A convicted murderer is now in even more trouble in Wisconsin for apparently trying to get a friend to be a part of a fake alibi. Last month, a jury found Jesse Kershevsky guilty of killing 62-year-old Lynn Hernan by slowly feeding her large amounts of eye drops in 2018. She's supposed to be sentenced soon, but her lawyers have since filed paperwork asking to withdraw from the case after a 37-page letter from their client was found. In it, Kershevsky asks a friend to forge documents and record audio pretending to be the victim to try to convince people that Hernan took her own life. The letter even includes a script for the friend to read. In addition to murder, Kershevsky was found guilty of stealing from Hernan. On Thursday, instead of having her sentencing hearing, the judge will hear motions to withdraw from the attorney. A mom is in jail in Maryland, accused of beating her 3-year-old son to death, and it was all captured on camera. Gloria Hughes is accused of beating her son, Jason Garcia, to death at a storage facility in Bel Air. She was found holding the little boy in her arms by a Harford County Sheriff's deputy. Court documents say a concerned person actually saw Garcia in a car with a toddler crying the day before, but Hughes refused her help. The records say Garcia can be seen on camera at a storage facility bashing her son's head into the ground.
Claims in this interview with the psychologist that this woman wasn't the only one that got away.
Is it safe to say that there are at least a few lucky people out there?
There's a lot of lucky people out there
who you didn't kill, that you would
didn't either make it in the house, they come home, or for some reason I didn't go. There's a lot of lucky people out there, yes. There have been more, if I would have succeeded. Yeah, you're almost guaranteed.
A Phoenix father behind bars accused of killing his family on Christmas.
Anthony Milan Ross shot his ex-wife and their 2 children after barricading himself inside their home for hours.
Better not cry.
You better not pout.
I'm telling you why.
This video of him and his son posted to his business Facebook page just hours before the little boy's life would end in a horrible way.
Santa Claus is coming.
Anthony Mylan Ross and his son Nigel singing.
I'm hanging out with Nigel on Christmas Eve.
The video painful to watch, knowing what would happen to Nigel just hours later.
We got the text at 2:50 from Mylan where he stated that he had shot and killed Iris and the kids.
They found an adult female deceased inside the parking lot.
He shot and killed her as she tried to run away. Then he turned the gun on his kids.
He hitched a ride on Christmas Eve and then shot the people who gave that ride. Tonight, deputies believe they have their man. And deputies say that man was standing in the rain in Greenville when the victims pulled over to help him.
After a ride to Anderson, investigators tell us he shot the man and woman who were in the car and left them on the side of I-85.
John Farrell Villarreal was apparently standing in the rain in Greenville on Christmas Eve when deputies say his victims Marie Fowler and Jerry Dobson saw this stranger, perhaps felt sorry for him and picked him up and were taking him to the state line. But before they could get there, deputies say Farrell Villarreal told Dobson he had to use the bathroom, and when Dobson pulled over near mile marker 16 on Interstate 85, they say the suspect pulled out a handgun with a homemade silencer on it and shot both victims in the back of the head, then dumped the victims on the shoulder of the interstate where a passerby later found them.
Hi, I'm James of Metallica. Back in 2010, our band offered $50,000 to help catch the person responsible for murdering Morgan Harrington. Since that time, authorities uncovered new evidence linking her killer to a similar assault on a woman in Virginia. If you've seen the person in this sketch or have any information about this case or any others, please contact your local police or submit your information online. Remember, any information, no matter how small you might think it is, could be that crucial piece investigators need to help solve the case. Right now, there's up to $150,000 reward. If you have any information on this case, please call the number on your screen. Thank you.
Jesse Matthew is serving 4 life sentences in prison for the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington.
It was Christmas Eve 2002. People in Middletown went to sleep dreaming of a white Christmas and woke to a nightmare.
They were all shot in basically assassination manner.
Jean Walliver and her daughters, 20-year-old Victoria and 15-year-old Elizabeth, found shot to death inside their home.
The scene with all that snow, it being Christmas Eve, added to the horror of the murders.
Police quickly arrested Ernest Walliver, the husband and father of the victims. His daughters had recently accused him of rape.
And so he had the best motive in the world. He was eliminating witnesses.
Walliver was ultimately convicted and received 3 separate death sentences.
But here we are 20 years later, and I'm not surprised because we haven't had a death sentence carried out in a long time.
Don't want to be present for today's hearing.
Because I'm tired of this re-election jazz. They're just trying to get promotional ladder climbing and political prestige from this. And I'm sick and tired of this. I'll probably get 3 more death row sentences, and then I gotta go to Pasco and Dixon for 2 more death row. How many times you gotta kill me? You know what I mean? This is bullshit. They don't need to be doing this. You people don't care. You want to press on with the jury and everything else to try to impress the public. And all I want to do is go back to prison, wait for the chair, and get the hell off this planet. And your corruption in these courtrooms.
Eileen's execution date for October the 9th fits in perfectly, a month before these elections. Brad Thomas, Jeb Bush's political advisor, is reported as saying, "We want to become more like Texas. Bring in the witnesses, put them on a gurney, and let's rock and roll."
A hitchhiker will spend life in prison for a deadly shooting on the side of Interstate 85.
How do you plead to the offense of murder? Guilty.
I'd like to see the death penalty. I'd like to understand why did you do what you done?
In court today, we learned Villarreal was trying to go to Georgia to see a 17-year-old he met online. He says his plan was to kill her family after they wouldn't let her leave with him. Investigators say they found several weapons in his home and vehicle. Today, he asked the victims for forgiveness and said he turned his life around in prison.
That was absolutely wrong. That I was a wicked, wretched sinner. And I know only two things. I'm a terrible sinner, and Christ is a wonderful Savior.
In another admission that reveals Rader's depravity, he told the psychologist the thrill had little to do with the kill, or for that matter, with the victim herself.
And I don't think it was actually the person that I was after, I think it was the dream. I know that's not really nice to say about a person, but they were basically an object. They were just an object, that's all they were. I had more satisfaction building up to it and afterwards than I did the actual killing of the person.
Lansing police say a serial killer who has been terrorizing the city since July is behind bars Thursday. They say he murdered 5 Lansing women in 5 weeks and brutally assaulted another. 3 of those attacks were this week. Chief Mark Alley says this is a relieving day, to say the least, for the city of Lansing.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that we have arrested a serial killer in connection with the recent homicides that have occurred against women in the city of Lansing.
The first, community activist Ruth Holman's murder. Then Deborah Cook was found murdered in Hunter Park, and Deborah Renfers killed in Old Town. This week, Sandra Eichhorn was found dead in her home, and Karen Delgado Yates murdered too. A 6th woman was assaulted by the serial killer but survived. In the press conference Thursday, they spoke of how integral that victim has been in arresting this man who was indeed the person we released in the sketch earlier this week.
If it weren't for our victim on Jones Street, we wouldn't possibly be here today.